welcome back. My name is Paloma and this is Money Facts. For those that don't know, I am a 25-year-old living in San Diego, California. I make about $55K a year before taxes, and I'm in debt. And so this is my journey in trying to become debt-free and also just find financial freedom and a couple of other things. And in today's video, we're gonna go ahead and do my home buying process. So we did end up buying a house back in 2022. We just celebrated a year here. Back in March is when we closed on the house. And so I'm gonna have a variety of videos coming out, and I'll go ahead and add in an image of the different topics that we're gonna be covering. Why we decided to move, a couple of questions we asked before we decided to move, and that's what we're tackling today. Our experience from collecting the materials, getting pre-approvals, going to the open houses, getting our bid accepted, the closing day, the first year of home ownership, and 2+ years. What does that look like? Before we decided to move in together, there was a couple of questions that we needed to ask ourselves, and I had really been thinking specifically because I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay with my family. I'll go ahead and tell you why in the next video, and just kind of what brought us to get into the position of deciding to live together. What did we have to ask ourselves before we moved in together? And I knew that if we went into the home buying process, that we had to get a 30-year mortgage, because a 15-year mortgage is good if it's your first. My understanding, of course, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was a 15-year mortgage is good for if it's your it's a starter home. It's not really your forever home, and you really don't plan on being there for a long time, and you're also doing more your payments, your monthly payments are much more than when you spread it out over the 30 years. And just knowing where I was financially then, where my family was and has been financially, and kind of where we could be in the next 5 years, I didn't think we could manage a 15-year mortgage right off the bat. And so then I was like, all right, let's say we just do the minimum payments, and it does take us 30 years to pay this house off. And even if we do refinance and make extra payments and this and that, it'd still be a 15-year commitment. Do I want to be with my family for 15 years? Can we handle another year together? And so you don't have to ask yourself these questions if you're not considering moving in with someone going into something so big as co-signing to a mortgage. But what I did was I searched up questions to ask yourself before you get married. And yeah, that's extreme, but really, we did go into a huge commitment that you probably wouldn't consider going into unless you were getting married to somebody or they were family. Like us. If you do search that up, there's so many questions out there for you a list of questions that people have compiled and put together for you to ask yourself. I really just kind of chose the ones that I felt like I didn't know the answer to yet, based on what I knew about my family, and questions that I wanted us to answer together, so that we were all on the same page and there wasn't some miscommunication or assumptions. And that it was also down on paper, so that if we needed to go back to that, it was written or documented in one way or another for us. The first question you want to ask yourself is, do you want to live together with your partner, with your parents, with your siblings, with your tios, with whoever is going onto this? And the answer for me was yes. My brother always planned to live with my mom until he got married. And then my mom dreams of us when we do get married, or, you know, do whatever it is that we do in our lives, that we all live together in one household and we're one big happy family. So it really was up to me to answer that question. The next question that I asked, and this is now the questions that we started asking together and answering together. And so I asked, why do you want to buy a house? So you should definitely consider the different reasons that you want to go into the home buying process. Really knowing for yourself, like, why do you want to buy a house, especially right now in this moment, or in the next year, or in the next 3 months or 6 months. And for us, because it was like, depending on what the market is, we could be closing on a house as soon as a month and to a year and 2 years. And so some of the things that, you know, we answered was freedom. Like, and that was my word, freedom. Just because our previous household was our childhood household, and it was like my mom's rules for the house. And now, because this is a combined mortgage, it's really our household, so we all get a say in what the rules are, what the expectations are, and things like that. The other thing is, somebody else mentioned, was space. Having somewhere that we could grow as a family, especially because at that time the pandemic had just kind of like, during the pandemic, when we were in 3-month lockdown here in San Diego, it was announced by the mayor that we were going to be in lockdown for 3 weeks and that everybody needed to go home. You know, my sister came home. I was driving down from Santa Cruz. You know, my family was sent home, and it really turned out to be 3 months of quarantine and lockdown, and really only one person from your household could get out to go do grocery shopping. And it was very intense. And I think just like me moving back after 4 years of not living with my family, and then, you know, it went from like, my sister had to make a quick adjustment to, she had her own bedroom and I was back, and now we were sharing a bedroom, to, you know, my mom was home every single day, every single second. So she was, you know, busy cooking for us 24/7. We were gaining weight and we weren't realizing it. Like, you know, she was stressed, so she was cleaning. She just was stressed financially, right? Not working for 3 months really gets you thinking about, like, how am I going to pay the rent and all of these other things. And then, you know, I was going to school, my brother was going to school, like, we were both finishing off college. My sister, you know, was also in school. So it was just like everyone was crowded in one place, and we didn't have anywhere to go. We had a little balcony, but that was it. The next thing to ask yourself is, what do you want in a home? So really, you know, our realtor was very good with helping us answer this question, and getting us thinking about what that could be. So thinking about the location, where in, you know, San Diego County do you want to live? Do you want to live outside San Diego County? Like, and if it is San Diego County, are you open to all the whole county, which we have 13 cities? Or, you know, is it just a specific area? Like, what is the location? The other thing you want to consider is size. So how big of a space and a home are you looking for, right? How big is the house gonna be? How big is the yard gonna be, or the property? So just thinking about the size that you want. So is that you know, a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom? Is that a 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom? Is that a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom? You really have to think about those things. And we selected a range. We said definitely 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom was like the, if we couldn't find anything and we really had to, you know, move in a pinch, that's what we would go towards. And ideally we wanted a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house with a garage that we can then convert into a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom place. You also want to think about the amenities that the property and the house has. So, you know, does it need to have a pool? Does it need to have a yard? Does it need to have a 2-car garage, parking? Does it need to have all the big appliances in there already? Does it need to be like furnished completely? So just like thinking about those things. The other thing is the age of property. Do you want a new construction, old construction? Like, we really didn't care about that specifically. We paid no attention to it. We're just like, it doesn't really matter. You know, we were more like, we just want to go in, see it, and see how much needs to be fixed up. And then lastly, and the most important thing, is you need to think about the price range. So for us, it was specifically looking at how much we got approved for, and then how much we were willing to actually spend. And that is, you know, we really had to figure out together how much we were willing to spend for a house and how much we were willing to have our monthly mortgage range be, so that we didn't feel like we were drowning and or just everything was going towards the house. And yeah, I also, if you want me to go specifically on how we broke that down, I think our lender did such a good job with answering our questions, walking us through those things. And then also, you know, I watched a lot of YouTube videos on like how much you can realistically afford on your income and how much house you can actually afford. And this leads to how much can we afford. So this one goes in a little bit deeper into that price range. So looking at our income, seeing how much we made in the last year, and when you are getting pre-approved, they will look at those things. And there's a couple of like specific things that they ask for, so I'll also be breaking down that in a future video for you. But just knowing how much I was making income wise, how much my brother was making, how much my mom was making, and knowing what our combined income would be for the house specifically would help us out. Also knowing any debts that any of us had and what the total was together, because again, if we're going to be co-signing on the house, that will all be lumped together. And then we also kind of broke down how much we can afford in bills. So we started looking at how much we had been paying at the apartment, and then kind of estimating how much we would pay for a house, right? So seeing like what is our current bills looking like, and we kind of broke down in like, well, what could the potential bills be that we are not paying right now. The fourth question that we asked ourselves was our down payment and closing costs. So one thing that, you know, I let my family know was, as we're going into this process and purchasing the house, you know, there's the loan and what the lender is going to be paying for on the house, but then there's also, you know, money that we need to have up front to be able to do a down payment and our closing costs, on top of, you know, all these other little inspections and fees and things that add up to it, plus you know, any little extras that we need, plus then once we actually get the house, because we knew we're going to be getting a fixer-upper, we'd have to invest into the house. Like, you know, the bigger things that we needed when we first moved in. And so we decided then that no matter what it was, whether it was the down payment, the closing cost, you know, the extra little fees, the home repairs, etc., that we were all gonna divide that equally. And so far we have divided everything equally. Question that we asked is the deed and the mortgage. So we identified potential disagreements that could arise for us. We're talking about who's going to be on the deed. We all on the deed and the mortgage of the house. You know, just thinking about, like, you just never know what could happen. And so being able to take the time to pause and think about what could go wrong, and what disagreement we could have. Like I mentioned, you know, we're trying to make it work with 2 people is hard. Trying to make it work with 3 people is even harder. And so there's more room for disagreement to happen. This also leads us into the 6th question that we asked. We asked, what happens if we break up, right? And so this really goes with the wedding question. But for us, it was like, what happens if we break up? If, you know, for whatever reason, we do not want to be living together anymore. We haven't finished paying off the house, or we have been finished paying off the house. Like, what happens? What is our, you know, process? Like, we need to know about that kind of now to know if we even want to go into in this in the beginning. And with that, sub questions that we asked were, how would profit and loss be split between of us if the house is sold? You know, could one party buy out the other parties, or the other party that wants to leave? And really, like, taking a look at that and figuring out what that meant for us. You know, things end badly for everybody involved, but sometimes, you know, it's just inevitable, and there's breakups that are amicable. And so, you know, thinking about that and figuring out what that could be. Our 7th question is, what happens if someone cannot pay their part of the rent? And this, again, is for not just the rent, but their bills or whatever it is that they're in charge of as a member of the household and as a homeowner. And so we identified 3 possible things that could happen that would lead to somebody not being able to pay for their part. We said that if, you know, for whatever reason you don't have a job, you know, you got laid off or you got fired, or, you know, things like that happen, you have 3 months to, you know, get yourself situated again. You look for another job, start another job, you know, do what you need to do to come up with, you know, a way to sustain yourself financially. Or we would start, and after those 3 months, if nothing had happened yet, we would sit down to have a conversation about what happened, why you're not able to get a job, and continue making payments for the house, and if, you know, you need to start looking for somewhere else to live. Which is, again, like, why we decided to have a meeting before, you know, you're just like, oh, well, you're just kicked out, like your landlord probably would if you couldn't pay for your rent. We also identified that, you know, another reason that you wouldn't be able to pay for your part of the house payment is, you know, that you got hurt, or you know, got some type of disability that, you know, you weren't foreseeing, that didn't have, and also, you know, that you just got retired and got old. And that was specifically because my mom is old. And so, you know, we needed, like, it's there, like, we're all getting old, but she's closer to retirement than we are. And again, like I said, within those 30 years, if we are in this debt for 30 years, then that is definitely something that's a possibility. And so we also identified that everybody must be paying, you know, their rent and their bills to still have claims to the house. And, you know, if they decide that they want to leave, or, you know, they got kicked out, they would be paid back what they invested in the house, right? So, you know, we invested on the roof, or we hope to in the future invest in like expanding the house and like different things like that. And if, you know, this person invested, they would be given back that money. And this is very much for if we're still actively paying for the house and it hasn't been paid off. If any of those three happen, you know, there's a variety of different sub things that happen that we have to then have a conversation together as a family to identify what's the best route for the given situation and what would be happening next. Brings us to question number 8. What happens if people want to leave, right? So this isn't like a, you know, I have a job, I'm not hurt or in any way, you know, unable to work, and I'm not old or retiring, but I just want to leave, right? Like maybe, you know, I don't want to live with my family no more, or maybe I got married, or maybe, you know, my job offered me to move somewhere else and relocate to, I don't know, New York. You know, like life happens and you don't know what you don't know. And so we really talked about like what happens if, you know, at some point somebody wants to leave and it's, you know, we still want to be, you know, in good terms and not have any of this bad blood or things between us. For us, we identified that you would need to give a 1-year notice of the fact that you are gonna be moving out. You know, and that is really for the people who are staying, and to start thinking about if they're gonna be selling the house, right? And it's just kind of like, well, you know, it turns out that all four of us want to leave, right? And nobody really wants to stay in the house. Then, you know, we would start the process of like selling the house, or, you know, just depending on where we were, like we have to start thinking about like, are we selling the house? You know, and if we're not selling the house and we're still paying off the house, then we need to start finding another way to replace that income or that support that the other person was giving to the house, right? Which is finding a new payment option, right? Is that we're now going to be renting out that room to you know, someone we know? Is that we're the people that are staying are buying that person out, and you know, they also need time to increase their income to be able to support that and sustain that. Like there's a couple of things that need to happen so that if you do want to keep the house, you don't lose it on foreclosure because you can't pay now, and if you do want to sell the house, that you have enough time to go through the home selling process. With that, a new subcategory was born, right? So it really kind of like helped us put down into 3 things that could happen if we have not finished paying off the house, right? Where it's like option 1, you know, they lose claims to the house and the ownership of the house. If it's in bad terms, they just up and left. Then they also lose what they invested, so their down payment and closing costs and everything else. And you know, we would try to find a legal way to sue that person to legally, you know, that we were protected. And that's something that, you know, all 3 of us know. And so none of us are in that space of where we're thinking that that's going to happen anytime soon, but you know, you never know, it could happen. The other option was that they could leave, and And if they still want the claims and ownership to the house that we haven't finished paying off yet, then they would continue paying their bills and mortgage as usual so that they can keep their 1/3 of the house. And we'll still have original claims and investments, if the house ever does get sold and things like that. And their decision will be respected. Like, everyone's more than welcome to do and leave, as long as they are meeting those responsibilities that they went into, right? Like, we asked these questions before we signed anything and moved forward with that. And the fact that we all three decided to move forward with this and sign on that paper is because we were owning up to that responsibility of purchasing and buying this house. B category of this was if the house was paid off and that person wanted to leave, right? Then they can leave and do whatever they want. They are still owners to the house, and they still have claims over the property. They're part of the property, and then we try to again go into more of a legal action and just kind of see what that means if some of the owners are not living in the property anymore and some of the owners are living in the property, because there are like rental taxes for it being an investment property versus being like the place of residence, and a couple of things that you have to consider. And the last question was just an open question, like what are the doubts or questions, concerns that we have before we go into this. And I will say that after the other questions, a lot of questions and doubts and concerns were brought up. And because we know each other so well, like we were able to, ask specific questions to people, like if we go into this and this and this happens, and because I know you and I know that you've said this before, done this before, like is this something that you would do if we got into this X situation, or just like knowing and understanding where that person is, and also kind of like we're not judging you, like you are who you are, but it's definitely something to consider if I'm gonna sign on to a mortgage with you. And so that last question was really just like a open Q&A for any questions that we had together as a family that had come up. And I'm so glad that we did take the time to have a family meeting and conversation around those things, because it really got the ball rolling. I had been asking myself a little bit like smaller questions and more like, oh, do I really want to be with my family, and like this and that. And these questions really helped us focus in more on the like financial, and like we're really gonna sign on to something that's like legally binding for all of us. And what does that mean? This is really like an investment property, something that we're investing in. Like a lot of money is going into it, not just to pay off and be owners of the property, but when anything breaks, and like painting it and upkeeping it and like designing and doing anything to this, you really are look at them. Can you see them? They're fighting over a watermelon piece. Bruh, they're so crazy. There you go. That was it. Those were the 9-10 questions that we asked ourselves before we decided to move forward in the home buying process and purchasing a home in 2022 with 3 co-signers, living with our family. So let me know if there's any other questions that you asked yourself before you decided to move forward with the purchasing process, or getting married, or just deciding to move in with someone. There's really a lot of things that you have to consider. And for us, these were some of the beginning questions that we asked ourselves as a family before we decided and try to figure out if this was the right move for us. And like I said before, now, a year and a half later, I am so glad. There's been ups and downs and hiccups and like home repairs, and like my budget stressed me out because of my debt and like other things that were playing into that. But I'm so glad that we asked these questions beforehand, and I had a bigger picture and sense of where we were going, and we all knew what we were getting into. And without further ado, thank you so much for joining me. Go ahead and subscribe, and I'll catch you next week for our paycheck. Bye. Okay, if you're gonna be in the video, you got to behave. Uy, uy, uy.